Gary, good evening.
Good evening.
Interesting show this tonight we've got coming up. Kelly Myers is a producer and musician from Las Vegas that's going to be joining us and talking about his synth collection. He's an actual DJ, producer and everything, so we're going to be talking about actually using them as opposed to just collecting them as well, which is really interesting.
I love the idea of someone who's got what collectors would die for, but he's also using them as well.
Yeah. Quickly before we dive into that as well, as I mentioned, the MIDI 2.0 stuff is live now in the Insider builds in today's build. So 27788 on the Canary channel. So I'm just installing that now. So all the stuff that Pete Brown talked about on the show at the end of last year is included in there. So check that out. And my new album's out as well. So
very good it is too.
I'm glad you had a listen. Yeah, have a listen to that. It's 30 minutes of a journey across a galaxy.
This is beautiful. That's been playing virtually non-stop in the car on the jaunts the last couple of days. So, really good stuff.
Oh, excellent. Right, well, let's get straight to Kelly and start the interview. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, and good afternoon from you're in Las Vegas.
Yes. So beautiful. I'm going to try to convert it really quickly to centigrade for you. Probably 18, 20 degrees for you.
Oh, very nice. Yeah,
it's nice in Vegas this time of year. It's one of my more favourite times to visit.
Yeah, we covered the CES show for a number of years. We've been a few times. So it's beginning of January usually that one, but it's much better to get out of the UK in the beginning of January, sort of cold and miserable, to the nice pleasant weather there.
I've been there. I was in London for a year, and this was like okay, but very similar weather to Vancouver, almost year round. So and lived in Vancouver for 15 years as well, so I get that.
It's a balmy 2 degrees Celsius where I am at the moment.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
like some freezing rain.
Yeah, definitely. It's great to get you on the show. I think I connected to you up on I think it was on the Vintage Synths groups or somewhere like that. I've been a few places trying to find people talk synths, and we got connected on there. So what I wanted to do is talk to you a bit about your synth collection and which ones you've had and sold and that kind of thing, which ones you're still trying to get. But before we get into that, just give us a bit background on yourself and how you sort of got into music and electronic music and synths.
Well, I grew up in the industry, but on kind of the outskirts. Normally, I do film and television visual effects production, which I've been doing for 35 years. I started that when I was 15, so I haven't been doing this all that long. But the family, on one side, my father was DJ and promoter for years, television, personality for local news in Western Canada. And my mother ran one of the largest dancing schools in Western Canada, if not the country, at certain points in time. So we always were around music, but I didn't have the ability to go and buy whatever I wanted as a kid. So I only fell into music later, but by rediscovering a lot of the records that kind of came from both my father as a DJ and my mom's collection for doing performances and recitals, that sort of thing. So I grew up with an eclectic kind of collection of everything from classical music, Russian ballet, the whole works, all the way up to breakdancing, and then that's where everything kind of shut down. So by the mid 80s, early 90s, all that kind of migrated to my possession. So I had access to all that material, plus the pianos that were left over from the dancing school, my father's DJ equipment, and that's where I started kind of pulling things apart and reconstructing things for myself. Originally trying to record local bands where I was growing up, but I was always attracted to the electronic music side of things, because it kind of got me going with my love of 80s bad science fiction action movies, and
great, I love those.
Carpenter scores, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So and I always really appreciated that. Of course, Walter Carlos, Wendy Carlos, with Clockwork Orange, Tron, a lot of the early works with films like Escape from New York actually is one of my favorite soundtracks.
Great score.
Yeah, and I listened to the various theme pieces of that, including the Duke of New York, because that's one of my favorite pieces from him, which is just a fantastic work. And then from there, the electronic side for me, musical influences. By the time I was about 13, 14, I started getting into industrial music. Very early versions of material that would come up from bands like Front 242, Frontline Assembly, Nine Inch Nails, and I eventually started DJing that stuff by the early 90s. And then I discovered trance music, and trance music was very similar to the orchestral stuff that I was hearing from my mom's record collection on the classical orchestral side with classical music, and I could hear those tones and elements coming out of the Dream Trance era of trance music, which would have been Platypus Records or early Perfecto out of the UK. And then I was buying a number of Japanese techno records at the time. This goes back to like 1992, 1993. So I'm like, okay, well, how is this stuff being made? And I had the computer, and I was working in computer graphics at the time. Like I had to do more research on this. So the first synth, like the actual first synth that I actually had that was one of these synths that everybody wants, was actually the Roland TB-303. I starved for that.
Oh.
I found one in a shop, absolutely mint condition, with the manual and the silver bag, $600 Canadian at a time, and that was 1995.
What year was that?
1995,
right? Yeah.
So a guy that I knew worked there. He's like, dude, this thing just came in. It's on commission sale. I really shouldn't do this, but if you get down here and give me a deposit of $300, I'll let you lay it away for like a month or two. So I'm like, okay, done. And I rushed over right after work, and just before closing time, literally slipped the money through the door just before they locked it, and he wrote it up and gave me a receipt on his way out to the parking lot in the middle of the freezing winter. And a month later, I had this thing. I had no way to connect it to anything else, but that's where through the DJing part of things, we started to discover that other kids that were in the city had some of these other pieces. So next piece to kind of get plugged into that in my first studio setup with a friend of mine who eventually moved in with, and became roommates. We had an SH101 Kensington
Nice.
controller to drive that, plus the 303. Then we had the I think it was the Juno 106, and then the Poly 6 from Korg, and then a few other things that kind of started together. Then the EPS 16 plus sampler was the center of that, and then we got a Roland VS 880 to record everything, and that was all still running off of an Atari 24 ST. So this would have been 1995, 1996 by this point. But circumstances being what they are, I've finally started to get inquiries to go out and do work in Vancouver in the film industry. So I left Edmonton in 97 or 98 and basically stayed the next 15 years in Vancouver with little jaunts over to the UK and Europe to do other types of work. So that studio, pretty interesting stuff. We didn't really have a great knowledge of how to make everything work at the time, and because of just life getting in the way, that studio flew apart. But at the end of the day, it was my 303. I picked up a 606 along the way, and then I had 3 Juno 106s, and it was all being plugged into one of these Mackie 1604 mixers at the time. Kind of kept going with it, and then I decided, okay, I really need to kind of collapse the amount of stuff I've got, because I'm being asked to go and work in other countries, and I don't really want the stuff to stay in storage. So I unfortunately had a run-in with Roland Canada, their repair guys there in Vancouver, because I had blown out a couple of the Juno 106s with their voices. And this was before the discovery that you could take the acetone and rip the ceramic kind of housing off the voice chips and use them again. So they went through the last set of Juno 106 voice chips 4 times. They had to repair each synth before they got it right, and I just got frustrated, and I sold 2 of them, and then took the other one for little bit of a kind of a tour-ish, so to speak, just going from people's studios, not stage stuff, just from studio to studio. And then I eventually sold that one as well. Kept the 303, kept the 606, and then started the whole process all over again. So I was, thinking, okay, maybe I can do everything in the box. That was my thinking around about 2003, 2004. Moving away, obviously, from the Atari or Cubase, then getting into the Cubase Nuendo for a while, because I was also doing some video editing work, and that was the thing to use along with Avid Express and various other editing solutions on the video side. And then I just said, well, this new software, Ableton, should give that a whirl. And I pretty much picked that up, and I haven't turned or looked back whatsoever with that. So that basically has been, my voyage in terms of software since then. But the synth collection currently is a little interesting. What we've got in here right now, and I'm just going to look over to my right. Apologies for not having webcam, but I will send you some photos. The heart of the system is a Roland MX1 from the Era line. And just for everybody that doesn't know how to pronounce that, it's called Era, not Aria or whatever.
That's one of the newer ones, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about 10 years old. No, they came out in 2014.
Right, yeah,
that's new. Well, it's technically a 16-channel mixer, but it was built specifically for performances. This runs obviously over USB 2, and it works in conjunction with the PC to do clock and drive the rest of the Era gear that I've got plugged into it. So I've got a TR8, two TB-03s, two TB3s, the Era ones, the green monsters. Then I've got the TB-03, and then on top of that, we've got a Korg Monologue, and below the main rack on the system, we've got a Focusrite Scarlett 18 I-20, and then an Octopre, then a couple of Alesis 3060 or 3630 compressors, and those run they're running sound from the original Roland TB-303 into it, and then I have it set to do sidechain compression out of the TR8's secondary outputs for the kick drum. And going down the line, we've also got Waldorf Micro Q, which is a synth that I picked up about a year ago. And I'm just exploring it, and I found a couple of really great editors for Ableton Live in the Live Max website for it, and the Waldorf Pulse, which is the original one, not the Pulse 2. Then we've got another oddity that I picked up a little while ago, which is the TR-505, and I don't know what you guys' opinions are about this, but I don't know if any of your audience have mods for this, for the 909 and the 707 mod for the TR-505, but I'm thinking about doing that.
That's I've got a TR-505 up there. Yeah, and you can change the chips on it, can't you? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it's a bit of a hack.
Yeah.
So turning into another 909. That is where things get a little bit more interesting. Going down the list on the other rack, just underneath the 505, we've got a Korg MS2000R, which is one of my favorite synths for doing bass and very lush pads for background stuff. And then something from your neck of the woods is a Red Sound Dark Star. I don't know if you know what that is.
Yes, I've seen one of those. I can't remember. It's analog, isn't it?
I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
It's just this bizarre beast. It actually can be made to sound like an SH-101 or a MC-202.
Right.
With a lot of patience, because it is built off of a synthesizing methodology that's a little bit bizarre, and it doesn't necessarily have a lot of controls on it. So there's a lot of menu shift to get to the other second set of controls. And you're all doing this off of like an old style LED 0 to 8 digit kind of 4-digit display. So like one of those little clock displays. It's got the little joystick in the center, which is quite interesting. But this thing, I picked that up from a gentleman. This is where the story gets a little bit wild. I saw it pop up. I'm like, you know what? Just because it's this obscure thing that I saw once in a store 25 years ago, I'm going to go and get this guy to drop off the Darkstar that he had. And I said, well, what else do you got? He's like, well, my roommate just died, and we're getting rid of all of his stuff. So he sends me photos of what he's got, and it gets really, really interesting. Much of it I've sold off to collectors, or just people here that kind of made inquiries and said, okay, if it's actually working and contested, I'll come over and I'll pick it up. In that collection, there was a Yamaha SY99.
That's the big sort of AWM FM synth, isn't it?
Yes, and beautiful synth. Needed a floppy drive replacement. That wasn't so much of a big deal for this guy because he was very technically savvy, and he was able to make that work. But everything came with manuals, so I have the manual for the Darkstar, so I can go through and actually go through this thing. But one of the other bizarre pieces that was in there was this rack mount piece, and looking at it going, geez, this is pre-MIDI proper era. And I'm like, Voyetra, why do I know the name Voyetra? It's a Voyetra 8 in a rack, of which they only came, right? Now, that synth didn't work. There was something wrong with it. It wouldn't boot up properly and get out of a certain maintenance mode. That I turned around and sold for $9,800 pretty much within the first 2 weeks of getting this gear off this guy. So all in, I paid about $500 for all this stuff, and I've kept about a third of it. So I'm still going through the exploration of it. So beneath the Darkstar, one of the other fun things that came years ago is a Korg MS-30, which is the sync box for
the 820.
For the no, this one's a 30, I believe. I'm looking at
the sync box. You could link it with the 20 and the analog sequencer and that kind of thing.
Well, this is the KMS 30. This one does the synchronization for the 303 and the 606. So, and then underneath that is the night bass from Art, which is about 33 years old. Works beautifully on the 303 as a distortion unit. And it comes with a few other extra little bells and whistles. Had to do some maintenance on that because it had been sitting in this guy's place and not being used, so it got a little crunchy. Then underneath, of course, there's the 606. Then a couple of my other favorite synthesizers. I really, really, became fond of various synths in the late 90s and had time on them, but in other people's studios. And over the years, I've been like, okay, well, these are the two synths that I really, really want. And I narrowed it down from like a list of 10. So the two that I picked up from that era was a Quasi MIDI Sirius, which is sitting on the top rack of my synth rack here. And then, of course, the Roland P8000. So those are my go-to classic trance synths. And then beneath that is Hydrosynth, which I bought for myself as a birthday present a year ago, and I've barely used it, to be quite honest. I haven't spent enough time in it to either like it or not like it. I did have some time on one in a studio here in Las Vegas with the deluxe version of it. Sounds amazing, and then you really start to go, well, can you get it into a mix very nicely? I find it doesn't mix nicely in certain ways, but I think that's just process. And then, of course, the Axis Virus TI, which is my main synth, where basically everything is clocked off of that, and that's more or less the setup. Sound wise, just a pair of HS7s with a HSS subwoofer from Yamaha, and that's effectively everything in here. Give or take, small little Behringer bits that I use as shelves for various gear, and you'll understand when I send you the photos. It's fun stuff. So that's more or less my setup. I did, however, spy an SH-101 here yesterday. Guy is selling it. He wants $1,300. I'm like, yeah, maybe. I really need to do a gut check on that, or possibly get rid of one of these other synthesizers. I don't really need two TB3s. I'll take one.
Yeah.
But
So from that, I was going to ask you actually about the TB. You mentioned you had a 303, an original one, and you've got the TB3s. How do you find? Is it a good clone? Is it something different? How do you find that?
I'll be honest with you. The TB-03 is close. It's not the same thing though. In in a lot of ways. I do like the fact that they, integrated the original method of doing programming, like the two original methods of the TB-303 in the TB-03, because I can go between the two units and not have to do this complete brain switch on how to program them. I can put them both into that mode and just, keep on going and hit start on the MX1 and it treats it the same. The TB3 is a completely different animal, and I've been very frustrated with them in the past, but over the last, I'd say, year and a half, again, because of these Max for Live instruments that come out and give you more deep access to what's under the hood with the TB3, it's kind of opened me up to using it again in various ways, and not necessarily in like a bass way, more like drone sounds. There's various effects processing that you really can't get to from the main unit. If you have it with one of these Max for Live editors, it changes the game on these. And we've seen aftermarket prices for these things go up to $1,500 now. There's some crazy people on Reverb being what it is, wanting $1,500 or $800. They're going right now in Vegas for about $500 to $700. Which I found completely bizarre, but again, it's that editor that cracks them open. So in terms of historic legacy, I think the TB3 is closer to the TB-303 because it's being rediscovered, and it's being rediscovered as an instrument right around the time frame, like 10 years after its release. What is this? And is it this instrument that I guess the TB3 compared to the TB-303, just in terms of time that it was around the market and it failed, it's about the same time where it really breaks through, and people rediscover what it can do, or discover that it has a certain tonality to it that pretty much has the capability of giving itself its own subgenre of music. Because what was the TB-303 originally developed for? It was a helper instrument for guitarists. It wasn't anything else. That's how it was, manufactured, built, and marketed, and it failed, according to some people. The TB3, I think people are rediscovering it in that same way and putting it to different use and abusing it for such. That pretty much, I'll say that it's a close emulation between the TB3 and the TB-03. To a TB3, but only under certain conditions. But I do like the fact that the TB-03 does the programming the same way. That was the biggest bonus. And I had the TB-3 for years before picking up the TB-03, and I still felt that it was a better move for Roland to release the Boutique series for people that felt that the original kind of model thinking process was going to satisfy that part of the market. The Era stuff is really cool, but it just seemed like you remember the MC groove boxes out of the mid-90s? Yeah, it's felt a little too much like that in terms of how it was released, the marketing for it, and the market that they were trying to push it to. But there are guys that are out there now that I've been watching on YouTube that are working with multiple Roland MX1s to do stuff, and they're really rocking it out with some of the setups that I've seen. And it's like, why would you go for a mixer like this? And it comes down to the capability of being able to drive multiple Boutique or Era boxes and other units that are compatible with it, and then you still get the other analog inputs on it as well.
So in general, what's your philosophy on on the clones or modern remakes of the sort of the classic synths? Do you prefer to use the classics? Do you find the clones easier to work for, or do you think they're sort of two different things?
I'll tell you, like in the 30 years of owning the 303, I've only used it probably a handful of times on tracks. It kind of sits there. I'll work something out with it, record something in, and then leave it. I don't use it as a live, kind of instrument that's recorded and tracked in for a full track. I'll use it for 4, 8, or 16 bar loop, and then drop it in and go. Just because I don't like touching the thing because of its intrinsic value, obviously, and who knows? It might blow up the next time I turn it on. It is modded. I did put the Technology Transplant blue LED and key bed into it to replace the original, which I still have in storage. Very happy with it after that because it was a little bit touchy with the keys. But of the other clones that I've played with, I think Behringer probably not nailed it with the RD9 to a degree. I know that some people complain about the crash on that one and some of the hi-hat sounds. Having had a 909 in the past, although very briefly, I can tell you that it's pretty much the same thought process and instrument without those two exceptions. Obviously different form factor. I would really like to have another 909, but I don't want to have the problems that come with it. There's a gentleman here in the city who has one, and his hi-hats don't work on it. And that's a ROM defect that I think of several units actually came out of the factory as. So it's always been like that. And good luck trying to find a new 909 2.1 ROM that's got the timing fix for MIDI on it as well. So it becomes kind of a forced situation. You want the original if you can get one. Do you want to go through the fight of having to record it, integrate it, that sort of thing? It depends on what your studio setup is like.
Yeah. So, and what about sort of? You mentioned the SH-101, and have you got what other sort of analog synths are you putting there?
I would seriously, if I was looking at, and I am looking at this other guy's SH-101. The SH-101s were built like tanks, and they're solid. I have never heard of anybody blowing one up, unless it's been abused. And it's not like a Juno 106. I would never buy a Juno 106 again. I'll tell you that, unless it's gone through absolute, maintenance and refurbishment. There are certain synths that I will not touch again. The Juno 106 being one of them. Korg Trinity I won't touch again. I would probably consider some of the earlier Korg ones that we had in the studio, like the Poly 6. Maybe an Alpha Juno. There are those floating out here. The other kind of analog synthesizer that is kind of my holy grail would be an Alesis Andromeda A6.
That's early 2000, was it? Yeah.
Yeah, late 99, early 2000, I believe. And the story goes is that that synthesizer basically sunk Alesis to a large degree because it was so complex to manufacture and so expensive to do the R&D and then final manufacturing. And just a very, very difficult sell from a company like Alesis, although they made fantastic keyboards and a few really, really excellent synthesizers before. It just really hurts to go out on a note like that. But those are going for upwards of $8,000-9,000 now.
Right.
And I don't know if it's that necessarily worth it. I was paying some attention to NAMM or NAMM and saw that Behringer does have a Jupiter 8, or at least a prototype of it.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I think I'd like to try one. I'm probably never going to be able to buy a Jupiter 8 because of it. And so one of these, the Behringer ones, is affordable. I've got the Behringer Selena string ensemble, and I always wanted the original string ensemble. They're just so expensive and rare, aren't they? But you got one of these, and it sounds great. So I like the fact that they're recreating unobtainable synths. I'm not so keen on the stuff that they try and recreate stuff that's already available. But yeah, these unobtainable ones, I think it's a great idea. I mean, there's a profit that they're doing. There's a BX1, which is a DX1. So yeah, I like the idea of some of this stuff. I think they just announced a CR78 type one as well.
I saw that. That's quite interesting because those are floating around here as well in Vegas. And this is part of the reason why I moved to this area of the world is that there are a lot of recording studios, and Las Vegas had massive amounts of shows for years on the Strip. A lot of recording studios, and artists that are retired or moved out of LA years ago, like decades ago, to Las Vegas because it was quieter. It was easier for them to kind of just deal with retirement. And that stuff is now starting to pop up or has been moved from one show because it's shutting down, or a hotel is getting blown up and destroyed. So they move this stuff out. And you can find everything from extremely large SSL mixers and consoles to I believe somebody actually found a VMS 70 cutting machine here at one point in the last 5 years, and it immediately went over to Europe and has been restored. So finding the kind of gear that I've been after with trying to refill some of the holes from the original studio that we had in the 90s, that stuff is definitely around here. I think the SH-101 I'd probably pick up again because I do have a way to drive it with the Hydra synth because it's got the CV gate I/O on it. I'd be hesitant, I think, on an i09 because obviously that can be replicated through other means. But the Andromeda A6, just because that's more me just saying, yeah, I did it, versus I want this for a specific production reason. I still find myself, though, going to the JP8000 and the Access Virus and the 303 and just writing out just basic tracks for getting ideas and then going in and then pulling all the stuff that I want from there. If I were to probably go out and buy another synth today, new or old, it would probably be an Access Virus TI2, and then I could get rid of this old TI or move it off to the side because I really only use it as a synth engine. It's not basically a keyboard. I used to play, but I've done some really good damage to my right arm, so I'm not super dexterous anymore. That pretty much would be my choice. Now, I do know that ASM came out with a new Hydra synth, so to speak. I haven't really paid any attention to that. I do want to see what is coming out with the new Korgs.
I
know
that's why I've got the multipoly here.
Yeah. So, in comparison, and this is one of the things that kind of like irks me about what Behringer's been doing, but they just released this JT4000 or whatever they call it, JT4.
Tiny thing, yeah.
Yeah. What's the point? Like, really? I don't understand that. But every company goes through its weird moments. It could just be a fact of if you order this many components, you get this price on it. But if you order this many components, you get that much on it. But we're not going to make that many keyboards, so what can we do with this? And they throw it into a smaller product. Those kinds of decisions do exist, and they're out there. The rest of my setup gets a little bit bizarre. I have two sets of SL1200s. Actually, one pair is 1210s. That I bought when I was over in London for a year. I don't know how familiar you guys are with the DJ side of things, but I have a couple of Intimidation mixers from the 90s. One of them, the Intimidation Blue, and then an Apex Gold, which I actually still pull out and play on because they're fun to play on. And it's a little bit nostalgic for me to play on those boards because in Canada some of this stuff was so rare that if you even saw it in a magazine and thought, wow, that's going to be the thing, and then you go to look what the exchange rate was between the Canadian dollar and the British pound, if you wanted to order any of this stuff, you just said no and forgot about it and didn't think twice about picking up a Newmark mixer that was cheap or whatever it might have been. Though on the DJ side did bring me to the conclusion that in 2002 I would start my own record label, which is still active. We still press records. I did my first full actual record in 2014, and that was Black Tiger Recordings BTR 013. Our last release we did in 2021. Pandemic and all that other stuff, plus me moving across the continent twice. We're going to try to release new records this year, probably in late summer, and just keep on going from there. Working now with some of the other DJs and producers that are here in Las Vegas that are on the underground side of things, but they're well known enough that they've got traction to play in other cities. Actually helps to encourage me to be in the studio more often. But we're working with a generation of people that didn't necessarily grow up alongside that legacy of, hands-on synthesizers. There's a little bit too much instant gratification desire by some of them, even though they might be older, my age. They just kind of skipped over certain things, or they got into things late, and they don't have that kind of heritage or legacy or appreciation of how certain things are done. So
you're finding that they kind of go for like in the box, plugins, that type of thing, rather than the hardware with the hands-on control.
Yeah, it's literally throw every single type of plugin that you've got at it, and they're wondering why it sounds like hell. And you figure out who's really capable of being patient enough to go through a production process. And if they understand the concept of less is more, then you can work with them. If they're constantly on Instagram or YouTube looking up for the latest plugin that they saw in some ad because they've been hit with the algorithm that says you need this sample pack to be a better producer, or you need this new preset pack from Serum or whatever it might be, then you kind of lost them. And you come back to them a couple years later and say, have you figured out what you want to do? And some of the times, I tried this years ago with a couple of local producers, about 2015, 2016 when we first got here. And they ended up quitting. And I mean, just DJing, quitting, producing, quitting, and they either sell real estate or cars. And that was it. And they're completely out of the scene and everything else. So the flash in the pan types, or people that are in it for fame, obviously, there are other motivating factors there. There are good people here, but because of the way that the city is set up, it's extremely competitive, and there's also a lot of secrecy and kind of claiming of territory that people tuck away. So I'm the ghost. I'm not a ghost producer, but I've been here for 10 years now, and I've watched a lot of people do a lot of really interesting stuff. And it seems to be that the people with the staying power are the people that have at least some affinity or some degree or appreciation of what came before them, and are actually patient enough to go through, hey, this is synthesis on this particular unit. How do I make this work? It's not like this plugin or this other thing that I saw at Guitar Center or on some video that somebody was promoting. What is this sound? I want this sound from this era that was when I first got into dance music, or when I first started DJing, and that sound isn't there anymore, but I like that sound. I want it to come back. And they'll do a little bit of an archaeological deep dive with me. And it's like, yeah, we can do that sound here with this and this, or that piece of gear. I know where somebody's got one to go and find it. Like this last track that we've finished on the weekend, it actually has an SH101, two SH101 sounds in it. And then by sheer fluke of the universe or Facebook listening in, there's an SH101 on Facebook Marketplace. And that's just how it always works out, right? For me, I still have a lot of exploration to do with the micro Q and the Pulse, especially now that they have those controller instruments. I think one of the other synths that probably would find a really good home in here. And this is just me knowing, the JP8000 is one of these bizarre products that has manufacturing issues, and that is a JP8080. I'd probably go for a JP8080 rack mount unit to replace the JP8000.
The 8000, does that have the red glue issue like the JD800?
No, it's not the red glue issue. I think it's not specifically that on some units. It's just the capacitor components. They eventually go poof, 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 and they go really fast. But I got this from a guy who was living way out in North Las Vegas about 9 years ago. Totally dusty. Was living, in a barn more or less. I thought I was walking into some kind of Breaking Bad episode, and walked out with it and turned it on. Didn't have to replace the battery. All worked. Reloaded the original patches, and it was fantastic. I did eventually replace the battery afterwards, but checking the inside of it, you get those units that are right out of the box they're going to be screwed up or they're going to last forever. So, I don't know. Some people say they blow up, but there are some conveniences of not having a full-blown synthesizer in a rack and having it right next to you as a JP8000 or 8080. Because I've got limited space in this room, but I'm hoping to move out of here and into a larger space, and maybe I'll change my mind on that. I'm pretty interested in working with the Quasimedia Sirius on the next couple of tracks because I've rediscovered its bizarre synth engine and what it can do really, really quickly. And if I was still, interested in doing live performances, that would actually be one of the synths to go with me. Because it does have the full built-in sequencer, drum kits, and the vocoder mic inputs on it. The Virus TI, the MS2000, they have
MS2000 behind me there. That's the
yeah. So the MS2000R.
Right, the rack one, yeah.
Yeah. So. They both have vocoders on them, or all three of them have vocoders on them. But just having one with keys on it and not dealing with a little conversion box to make it work would be more pleasant, I think. This Korg mini logger monologue, I appreciate that it's mono, but could Korg just had it be some stereo out? Because it's not. It's a great little synthesizer. It's got a fantastic sequencer on it that's very similar to anything that you would find in a Groovebox era synth. But I look at it and go, maybe I should have just got the mini log rather than the monologue.
That's the mini log behind me there. Yeah, it's actually it's nice. It's the note, the number of notes is a bit of a limitation I found with it, but the polyphony on it. But same with the MS2000 as well. But yeah, it's got a nice sound to it.
Yeah, I still go back to the MS2000R for like really, really, really subsonic bass. I find that it's capable of producing stuff that nothing else in the studio will, with maybe the exception of the Virus. And there's a certain degree of aliasing on the Virus at certain frequencies that I've kind of noticed over the years. The MS2000, I don't know, this was based off of the same engine that's in the Radius, if you remember the Radius. So
over there.
Yeah, well, you've got one.
Yeah.
We should be interviewing you. So I don't know what it is about the MS2000R, but it's just got a really, really, really clean sound to it, which you can garbage up and make dirty after the fact. But it's so good at certain things.
Yeah, I did a video last week actually where I've got the multi-poly here and I put the MS2000 alongside because it's 25 years of sort of virtual analog technology between them. Mm-hmm. And it actually came out really well apart from the polyphony. It sounded really, really well. And I've actually recreated some of those sounds, some of the presets on the multi-poly. So and they've come over quite well actually. And I've done the same thing with the Radius for a future video.
I would love to be able to share some of these presets and patches going back and forth just to do those comparisons. The fun thing about the Red Sound, the Dark Star, is that if you really get into it, it has a lot of power to it. I understand why people think it's garbage, but again, look at what it's going for on the used market. 150 pounds at the most, $200, $220. If you really, really get into it, it's a soundscaping dream. Like it does a lot of stuff that it's incredibly difficult to get out of other synthesizers once you get your head wrapped around it. Like I said, just below the surface, there's an MC202 or SC101 dying to get out, and it's a fantastic little box. It's totally not rack conforming. I don't know who designed this thing, but it takes up too many spaces for it to be comfortably used in a normal rack. But it's just a bizarre piece of gear. I don't think it gets enough attention or love, and that includes me saying that. Just having, for the first few months, it was trying to go through the manual, which is extremely dry, and then actually getting the time to go through it. I think people's patience with certain gear is also a factor of whether or not they like things right off the bat. Certain synths are intuitive, certain synths are not. Like DX7s, 250,000 of them made, if not more. Worst interface that you could possibly imagine, but they defined a certain sound after a certain period of time from 1984 to about 1992. Yeah. And you can't say that really about any other instrument or synthesizer on the market, can you?
No,
in history.
Yeah, you hear that, and it brings you an eerie, especially get the EP or the bass sound or the slap bass sound.
Other than a Korg M1, which I got rid of the rack of that last year. There's no other synthesizer that I think does that in terms of being pronounced. And also being more than just a particular sound. Like everybody knows what a 303 is these days to a degree, but it only does that, and it doesn't really do a lot more.
So if I said to you, I'm going to come to you, you've got to get rid of, you've not got space, you've got to get rid of everything. If there was one piece of kit that you've got there that you wouldn't keep, which one would it be?
Just because it survived through all the stuff, that I would have to keep the 303 and the 606. And I consider them
classic house there.
Yeah. Well, I consider them because they're both same serial number. They were both done in the same production run, the same week, and I've had them the longest. And there was a point in time where I was not, with home. I was bouncing from people's couches to couches, and they always were no more than a foot away from me. They're like pets. They stay with me, and there's really no way that I'm going to be parting with those. Unless it's at a point where I can't hear anymore, and then I would consider selling them. That would be the the probably pretty good reason to part with them at that point. Or I can't see, and I don't have hands or something. I really can't see these being departed with me. After that, it's the Access Virus. I keep going back to the Virus all the time, just because it has so many patches available for it, and I've spent 10 years working with it and making my own patches, so I've got probably 30, 40, 50,000 of my own patches that I've made. Some complete garbage, but others are really, really excellent stuff that I've used on records of ours. And outside of any of the other gear, I think that would be the synthesizer that stays with me. I know that it's getting long in the tooth for support on the software, but I'm on a PC, so I don't have those issues. And to be honest, I don't really understand why a lot of people have issues with the Virus in the first place in their setups. When you understand what it's supposed to do, it's like if you cracked 2 sections of the manual, this would have totally made sense. And again, I would probably replace it with a Virus TI2, but after that, everything else is pretty much exitable. But going in order, it'd be the 303, 606, the Virus, the JP8000, and then everything else after that could go and bye-bye.
And then you mentioned a few things as we were going along. So just the one thing you can, you've always wanted, and you can have it. Which one will it be?
I would really like another TR-909. Thinking about it, and after talking about it this evening, I really, really would like to have it. And it comes down to more about what I'm listening to and playing as a DJ. And that minimalistic sound of just basically a 303, 606, 909, and a sampler. And with that, you can make banging techno.
Yeah, definitely.
Or make a really fantastic live performance, in the style of Jeff Mills or something similar. We have a lot of really, really big, large production shows here in Vegas, especially at the Sphere. Enema is just finishing up his End of Genesis series. We have EDC here, or the Electric Daisy Carnival, yearly. So this city has a lot of very, very high-end, production value performances. My desire would be to be able to just drop into somewhere, nobody knows who I am, plug those old bits in, and just bang out like 45 minutes of the most minimal but solid techno with just the minimalist amount of stuff, and then just pack everything up and leave. And it'd be like, who's that mess? And that would be way more satisfying to me than having a headlining spot on some club here like Omnia or Hakkasan or even at EDC. I really don't have desire to do those types of shows. I think it's much more enjoyable to do something like that, or like a big DJ small club type thing. Which we used to have in Canada, which was sponsored by Benson Hedges back then. Guys like Carl Cox would drop into a club that only holds like 250 people, and nobody would know who was going to be playing until the doors opened. So those types of events were more interesting, and I think that's more encouraging of underground, music where people go to really appreciate it because they're a little bit more open-minded than, oh, I'm going because this guy's on and then I'm leaving, and you're paying $345 for a festival ticket or something like that. It's like, it's just madness.
So if anybody wants to check out your stuff, is there somewhere they can go to listen to it?
We are on Spotify. There's also the website for one of the projects, earlandmajors.com. It's Earl and the word rather than ampersand, majors.com. I go under several aliases. So DJ Lithium being the first one. For those who remember me, I was DJing on DI.FM during the late 90s, early 2000s. Then I had my stream on Apple iTunes way back. So DJ Lithium, you can find me on the Spotify there, plus Beatport, and then there's another alias which I don't use very often, which is the Mars Resistant Front. And that was me trying to work with other people here in town when I first showed up, and nobody wanted to do anything, so I just released a couple of singles off of that. And then locally, I DJ is just myself or Lee Majors, which is the unknown stuntman from.
Yeah.
The actor. Okay, the actor. Yeah. So that's where that comes from. There's going to be more material and new tracks out. I do have my EP that I've been trying to get out for the last year, although due to life and working with other people in the studio, it's been pushed back a little bit. But pretty much everything that we ran through for gear today, with the exception of maybe one or two bits, I don't think I'm going to use the 505 on this EP, but you never know, are going to be part of this 4-track EP. And 3 of the tracks are pretty much done. And that's going to go out to 12-inch vinyl release first, and then digital release will come probably 3 to 5 months afterwards. I'm a big vinyl and physical hard copy person, so I'm not giving that up. I will be playing records until I'm dead.
Yeah. Definitely agree to that. Well, it's been absolutely brilliant talking to you. Really enjoyed that. It's interesting to get your take on stuff, and it's always good to get a different side of music, and you come from the DJ side. So I really enjoyed that. So I really do appreciate that.
Thank you so much for having me. I do appreciate the time, and anytime we'll check back in a few months after some of these other tracks are done.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Thanks for that. I really enjoyed that.
Cheers. Bye-bye.